What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me. Now today we're going to create this cherry blossom scene in a nighttime variation instead. Now if you're subscribed here, you'll know that I've also posted this cherry blossom tutorial on my YouTube channel, and this is almost a part 2 to that using exactly the same techniques. So make sure to check that one out. I'll leave a link to it in the description after you've done this one. And while you're down there, make sure to hit the subscribe button for weekly Procreate tutorials. But if you've already completed all of mine and you want even more from me, you can get access to 60 plus exclusive tutorials over on my Patreon. I'll leave a link to them in the description down below if you want to go check them out. And as always, there's links to everything in the description down below: the canvas size, the palette, and anything else that I've used in today's tutorial. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've got your canvas and the palette, you're ready to go. Now there is a layer in my layers, just ignore it. It's just my initial sketch earlier on that I used, so I want to use it as a guide for this. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is add in the basic shapes first of all of the ground and the tree before we add in the background. So we're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to want to go ahead and grab this color here in the bottom left of the palette. We're then going to want to go to our brush library. We're going to want to go to painting, and we're going to use the Nico roll brush. So it's the exact same brushes we're going to use in this that we used in the version that's on YouTube. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. Now we're going to go ahead and just with our brush size, maybe around about that 4 or 5% mark just to start with, we're going to outline our landscape. So we want to sort of take up this tiny little area down here. So we're just going to come across here and pressing really firm at this point just to block in some shapes, and then just sort of peak that here and let that just run off to the right. So a little something like this, and then you can just go ahead and drag the color into this area, and you may just need to touch up any of the edges. As long as you've got something like this, a nice rocky sort of platform up here on the right, just where we're going to add our tree. And we're going to carry on exactly into the tree. Now you'll be able to just about work out my stencil, and I'll tell you what, for the rest of this sort of point, I'll increase the stencil up a little bit to 30%. So we've got our guide here, and this is kind of what you want to aim for, that twisting tree. Again, just like the other one we did on YouTube. So I'm going to start over here and just bring in the curve and let that just run out. Adding in some nice jitters here and there will be brilliant. You'll add in so much more sort of detail and sort of different texture to the actual tree itself. So maybe even just go back over certain areas and give them a little extra bump or lump. Now I'm going to reduce the brush size down to around about that 3% mark and go up the other side. So I want a much smaller brush now, and I'm going to just add that into this sort of point here. So this is going to be our main trunk, and it's kind of twisting, and then we're going to increase the sort of thickness up here until we get into some very thin areas up the top. I'm just going to start here and just block that in all the way off to the right up here, and we're trying to add in lots of nice little bumps and lumps in our little branches there. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just link this up here. So I'm just going to come down here a second, link up to that point there, so I can drag and drop the color into this space here. And if you end up with some areas of sort of residue here, this is exactly what we want. It's part of the brush. It's a beautiful brush. Now I'm going to go ahead and make brush size a smaller brush size, around about 2%, and we'll add in some of the branches. So we're just going to keep them nice and shaky, get a little bit thinner towards the end, and if you can let your pressure off a little bit towards the end, and you'll end up with this nice sort of thinner in terms of the paint on the screen. It's going to look really nice, and just thicken that up maybe a tiny bit as it sort of makes its way back into the trunk. We'll create one here that sort of twists round a little bit. We'll break one off from here too, so we'll go along here, a little up here, and we'll create another one here too. So we're going to create this tree area here, and this is going to act as sort of the branches, of course, but inside the tree, just in case they're exposed when we hack away into the actual rest of the leaves that are going to sit on the top. So I'm going to create another one here, and this one's just going to sort of run quite close to the main trunk, but just a little thinner one. And then we'll also run one up here, and another one breaking off from there. Thicken that up as it gets closer towards the main area down here. So that's always, of course, what you want to do. Your branches want to get a little bit thinner towards the end. So the end wants to be the thinnest that they can be. And then you want to maybe thicken them up as they make their way back in. And giving them beautiful lumps and bumps will give so much more character. So I'm going to come down here too again. Thicken them up a bit more and let that just run off. And then we'll do the end over here as well. So I'm going to just let that run round on itself, thicken that up and let it run back into the trunk. So it nicely sort of graduates from over here all the way around into this main area, and then with one just branching off over here. It thickens up as it makes its way back in. So you want to end up with something like this, and this is the overall sort of layout that you want to aim for. So I'll leave that on the screen now if you want to pause and carry on to match that. And you can see we're just over halfway, ever so slightly. Now what we're going to do is, now we've got the basics of the tree in, we're going to go ahead and work on the background, because then we can go ahead and add in the cherry blossom colors afterwards. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath our sort of area here for the tree. We're then going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette and drag that onto the screen. So this is why I asked you to do the tree first, because it's such a close color that you might not be able to see your tree, but we do need to see the tree for some of the other colors we're going to add. Now we want to create a beautifully streaky sky. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab the color just beside it on the bottom row, far right, the second color in, and we're going to create our background. Now I want to use the Nico roll brush, but we do need to be very gentle with it. If I make my brush size around 30% and I make my way across the screen, I can create some really nice streaky textures in there, but we do want to be very sparing. So my pressure is super light. If you struggle with your pressure, make sure to lower your opacity. And we want to sort of create two areas of light. We're creating an area of sort of light in this area up here, and a little bit in behind our little bit of land here. And that's why I asked you to draw that in first, so we can see it, and then we can just add that color in. Now I want you to be brave, so just reduce your brush size down to about sort of 15%, add some streaks in here, and then we're going to erase from it by adding in the base color again. We don't just want one big block of color here. We want to have so much texture in here and have it chopped into and broken up and just nice and loose. So we'll paint across the sky there. Already that's looking great in terms of the layouts. I'm happy with that so far. I'm going to increase this one at the bottom just a little bit more until it somewhat meets the sort of midpoint of the trunk. So we've got a good amount of glow basically from down here in behind. And we can always come back to it anyway if we need to. We'll reduce the brush size down again to maybe about 7 or 8% and create some more streaks in certain areas just to give some more character. So little streaks here and there, the odd little one. And that one's maybe a little bit too bold, so I'm going to undo that, keeping my pressure again nice and light for the minute. And that is going to act as our sky sort of background template throughout the whole of this until we get to sort of the lighting effects later on, so we can come back to it and adjust it. Then what we can do is we can go to our colors and go back to our base color in the bottom right of the palette. And we can just run some streaks in here. Now my brush size is about 6% now. We can just break this up. We can create areas that we want to just destroy, like certain areas here, like a little patchy area in the sky. You can maybe break up the top a little bit more. It's about overlapping a lot of the colors and seeing what you want to just take away and add in. And you'll end up with a really beautiful sort of textured background. Even though it's just a background, this is going to pull off quite a lot of the overall texture for the whole design. And I can go back to my color again, and I can maybe increase the brush size again to something about 15% and just streak in again and try to be bold a little bit with some of the streaks that we add in, so little areas of color. So I'm going to leave mine exactly like that, and that's sort of what you can aim for at this particular stage. Next, what we'll go ahead and do is, while we're working on the background, let's add in some of the content. For that, it will really help us visualize our tree a lot more. So we're going to go to our layers, we're going to create a new layer. And we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and double tap in the top left to select white. We're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to artistic, and we're going to use the Taralea brush. Now we're going to make the brush size a bit small, so I've got it down to about 3% to start with. And what we're about to do is sort of draw in a very small dot, which is going to be our main area for the moon. So I'm going to draw in a sort of circle motion, a little bit something like this, with a good amount of pressure. So that's going to be my main area for the center of the moon. Then we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to drop the opacity down to about 45% and increase the brush size. I've gone up to about 8% now. And we're going to go ahead and just draw around that in a circle, but with a lighter pressure. So we're going to go around it a few times until you create like a big orb, and then go around it again a little bit closer. And we're trying to create this sort of ever-growing glow, a little something like this. And that's going to act as that area where this area here is the brightest in the middle, which is of course the moon. And then this is just essentially the glows that are coming off of it. So I'm going to go round again. And if you don't like the look of yours, or it's not rounded enough, you can go to your cursor and go to the option of warp, and then maybe just drag this one down, for example, for me, and then maybe just move that up and continue backwards and forwards. until I end up with a bit more of a rounded look, but the glow sits nicely in a circle on top of my moon. And then tap on your cursor when you're done. So the warp tool is really handy for something like that. Next, what we'll do is we'll go to our layers. We'll create a new layer and drag it underneath both of those moon areas. So just in front of your background that we created. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here. So it's the 5th color on the top row. We're going to go to our brush library. We're going to use airbrushing for this one and the soft brush. The opacity set to high, and we're going to go ahead and make the brush size fairly large, around about, that is the 34% mark. And what we're going to do is we're just going to tap on our moon here a couple of times until you start to realize there's a bit of a glow. So you could go to something like that. That's a bit too strong in my opinion. We just want to tap a few times, build it up until you end up with a little bit of a nice hue of color, a little something like this. And that will just give us a nice little area of color in the sky. Next, what we're going to do is, while we're working on the background, let's add in the flare and the lighting. I want to work on the background first, and then we can come forward with the actual tree area itself. So we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go ahead then and go to our brush, and we're going to go to luminance, and we're going to use the flare brush. Now the size, I'm going to go ahead and make it fairly large. It's sat at around about 94%. And we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here. It's the middle color in the first column. And what we want to try and do is we're going to rotate our canvas until it's about sort of 45 degrees off, so that these 2 points are pretty much horizontal from one another. If I was to tap there, we're trying to get that angle of the flare not perfectly into the corners. We don't need to make it like pixel perfect, but we want to just press down, not too much like that. That's way too heavy. And we'll undo that again. We just want to tap until we get a flare, something like this, and enough that it runs up towards that corner, but it also runs off towards the right. So that 95% is going to be good. Now, of course, that color looks a bit odd right now, but if we go to the layer and we tap on the blend mode and change it from normal and we change it to overlay, we'll get this beautiful little pink hue in the sky. And we can move this up towards the left a little bit so that the line of the flare runs straight through your moon and then down off, obviously, to the right as well. And then tap on your cursor when you're done. And then the next thing I want to do is go to my layers. And just underneath our moon and in front of this glow that we made in the back, I'm going to create one more new layer. I'm going to go to my colors and double tap again in the top left to select white. And I'm going to go back to my Taralea brush. So it's under artistic in the Taralea. I'm going to make the opacity though this time about 10%. I'm going to make the brush size a little bit bigger, around about the 12% mark. And what we want to do is, I just want to get rid of that solid line a little bit more around the outside. So I'm just going to go round maybe once, maybe twice, but just enough to add in a bit more texture and just blur that out around the outer edges. I don't want that solid orb, and you can see I've gone a little bit further adrift, but we're creating a much bigger orb, not so much a solid defined little circle here. Anyway, we'll leave that now for the moment. We're going to move on. Let's go ahead and add in some stars in our background. So we can go above the flare here, for example, and create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush library, and I'm going to go back to a trusty old brush set, which is the Stipple collection. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. And once you've downloaded it, I like to use the light one here in the Stipple collection. The opacity is always set to max and the size varies. So I always create 3 different sizes for stars. So I'm currently at 23%, and if I tap on the screen, I can see that they're fairly small. And these are going to then pretty much act as my smallest stars. So I create 3 different sizes so we can vary up, of course, the size of the stars in the sky. So we want to just tap a few times. You don't want to drag, because with a stipple brush, if you drag, you'll end up with quite a good cluster, and we don't want that. So once you've added in a few with the 23%, increase the brush size. Increase it up to say 40, and then that will be your mid-sized stars. Tap away, and you always want to try and make note of the sizes that you add, just in case you need to go back in. So 40%, and then we'll go up again, and we'll go up to around about the 57% mark, and we'll tap again. And these are going to be my largest stars. And they just create a lot more variety in the sky. So you have 3 different sizes, lots of different sort of distances between the stars and how close they are to, of course, us. And we don't want to do anything like that. We just want to tap until we add in a nice little splatter in. And then you can go back. So we can go back down to say 23%, which was the original size, and add in some of these smaller stars. Tap away and just add in a few. They can be nicely clustered. You don't have to make sure that they're super spread out from one another. But leave this area here behind the tree. So if you've added any too close, especially under the tree, because we're going to add in the cherry blossoms falling, just go ahead and remove them. Then what we'll do is we'll go to the layer, we'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We'll change the blend mode from normal to add on the top one. We'll go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we'll swipe to the right. And what you'll end up doing is you'll end up creating a little bit of a glow behind some of your stars. So I'm going to go up to about 6 or 7%. And then if we zoom in, they've got this beautiful little glow around them now. It's just a little something else, a nice little sparkle in the sky. And then tap on your adjustments when you're done. So now we've created our background scene. So that is the sky done. What we can now do is go ahead and add in some extra atmosphere down here. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer underneath our tree still. We're going to go ahead then and go to our brush, and we're going to go back to the Terra layer. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the option of artistic, Terra layer, and the brush size. We're going to make it around about sort of, let's have a look at that, about 5% to start with. And the opacity can be a little bit higher. We're going to lower it down anyway. And we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here in the top left of the palette. And we're going to actually change the brush. I'm going to make it 8%. 5 feels a bit too small. And we're just going to very lightly just create some clouds. So you just sort of tap away and create lots of little circles and just tap very lightly with your pressure. If your pressure is too high, of course, you can always lower it down. And then maybe increase the size up to maybe sort of 14% and lower the opacity down even further to 50, and tap away, just adding in a few that run astray a little bit higher. This will create us some nice sort of misty clouds. And likewise down here, just fill that in as well. Now at the minute, it doesn't look like quite so much, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to the layer. We're going to first of all tap on the blend mode for it and change it to overlay. This will sort of match it quite closely to the background, and you'll see that immediately. So if you need to, and you want to sort of bring your clouds back to life a little bit more, you can set your opacity back up to 75%. Bring the size down to 8% again, and maybe just define a few more that you feel, you want to just add in the odd little sort of speck of color and cloud that's making its way a little bit higher. So a little something like this. So that acts as your background area for a few of your clouds down here. We're going to go ahead and now add in a nice big area of cloud down here in the bottom left. So we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and use this color here in the top right of the palette. The opacity is still set to 75%, and the size could probably be a bit bigger. It could probably be around about the 13% mark. And we're just going to sort of rounded motion, as we always do with these clouds, just a rounded motion and create some clouds. Maybe the odd little speck that runs a little bit higher. You don't want sort of a straight line as such. So maybe something like that. That's very beautiful. Add in a couple over here, and then a couple just in behind the tree over here. So I'm kind of just very lightly tapping away, creating a nice light amount of cloud. And that I'm very happy with. Then what we're going to go ahead and do while we're working down here, we've only got one more sort of area to sort of consider. And if we go back down to our background layer, we create a new layer in front of it, and we go to our colors and we grab this color here, the second color from the bottom right corner. Then go to your brush library and go to airbrushing and the soft brush. We're just going to go ahead and with that large size, around about sort of 28%, we're just going to go sort of create an arc left, right, and increase the color a little bit in this area. You'll see that overlay layer start to come to life a bit more. And we're just trying to increase the amount of color just down in this area here. So I'm going sort of in an arc, backwards and forwards, sort of blending in towards our sky up there. So we're creating like a glow that's coming from in behind, and trying to just add that kind of third layer of mist almost to our clouds, giving them a little bit more depth. Now these clouds here, the ones that we added with the overlay, will now start to be revealed a bit more, but we want to tone them down a little bit. So if we go back to those, so it is this layer here in the background, we're just going to tap on the layer, add a mask, make sure you're on the mask and your color is set to black. Reduce your soft airbrush, and then just take the top off of them a little bit, so left, right, and you're just going to fade them out. See there, the difference now is beautiful. We have this little bit of sort of purple that runs up into nothing. It just blends out naturally into that nice bit of blue that we created in the background. And if you want to, you can add a mask as well to these clouds. You could tap on them, add a mask, and then do the same. Just sort of take the top of them off a little bit, get rid of some of the sharp color of them, just a little bit. You see I only sort of did it in this area here. I've left this one a bit solid and this one here too. Maybe over here, just take away a little bit. You're creating that nice transition between these front ones into the mid ones and then into that background bit of blue. And there we go. We've added in some really pretty area of atmosphere towards the bottom. The next step then is to move on to the tree. So we're going to go ahead and do the exact same steps. So we're going to go back up to our tree and create a new layer. but we're going to drag it underneath the tree layer itself. Because just like we did in the other one, we're creating a back layer of colour and a front layer of colour, and then erase from both of them. So this back layer of colour, we're going to go to our colours themselves, and we're going to make our way across some of these colours here. Now we're going to grab the second colour on the top row. We're going to make sure our brush is set to artistic and the Taralea brush. And the brush size wants to be 8% and the opacity 75. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the same sort of strategy that we did last time. We're going to draw in sort of circles of colour. And then we're going to go ahead and draw in another area of sort of cluster of leaves. We'll add in another one up here. So we're drawing sort of little circles. Another one over here. And leaving these like nice little gaps will sort of come into play a little bit later. We'll add one down here, we'll add another one up here, and maybe a little dash of colour over there on the right. And I can maybe just fill in that gap a tiny bit in the middle. So that's your background area, and you can see all the little clusters of colour that you added. We're then going to go back to our colours and grab the next colour along, so it's the third colour on that top row. At this point you may want to drop your brush size to the 5% marker, and if we zoom in, we're just going to go ahead and with our light source up here, we're going to just leave the top left edge of each circle, because that's where the light source is coming from, and layer this on top. So I'm going to layer on the red. It's nice and random. Take over that sort of bottom right corner. A couple of dashes up towards that top left edge is no problem. But you want to primarily leave your lighter colours up here, because that's obviously where the lighting's coming from. So every area that we added in with some colour, we're just going to add in this towards the bottom right area of that cluster. A little something like this. Little something in here too. I added a circle there. I also added a circle here and another one up here too. Simple as that. We then move on from that one and we make our way across again. And now we're going to get into the blue, which is going to act as the shadow colour. So we're going to grab that one there. It is the fourth colour on that top row. And again, darken up the bottom right edge. But this time you're trying to leave space for the red that we just added and that nice bit of light pink on the top area there. I'm going to add in this just down here. Dash in some of them in every single sort of patch of circular area of Taralea that we added in. And this is going to take over the majority of this, and you can see some of them, they run a little bit astray, they sort of leave that circle, and that's fine. We want to kind of end up with something along these lines. Then what we can do is just go to our colours. We're going to go down a colour, so just underneath that blue we've got a slightly darker tone, and we'll add in our final shadowy colour. So we'll just add in again with the same principles in mind. We now leave the pink, the red and a little bit of the blue, and we just chuck this in the bottom right corner of each one of those clusters, and your shadows are now being sort of represented by this darker tone. So adding in dashes of colour, so you end up with something like this. Then what we'll do is for a minute we'll go to that layer, we'll turn down the opacity so we can vaguely see the outline of it, so we get a guide from it. We're going to go above the tree now, so tap on the tree and create a new layer, and we're going to basically repeat those steps. So we're going to go to our colours, we're going to grab the second colour on that top row, brush size set to the 8% marker, and we're going to go ahead and add in some clusters, pretty much identical to underneath, but you know, slightly different. So this one here will look different to the one underneath it. Likewise, I'll add a cluster here, but it's going to look slightly different. This is the back side of the tree, so another one here. And just where you go over the branches, be a little bit brave with the amount of colour that you drop in. Nothing too mega heavy, but just enough that you can kind of sort of cover up the branches a little bit more. A cluster of colour there. There's a cluster over here. There's a cluster over here. And that one's huge, so I'll leave that as is. And then another one there on the right. And then we'll go ahead and go to our colours. We'll grab the next red along. So the third colour on the top row. Drop the brush size to 5% and repeat the same steps. So every cluster you add in this nice dash of red and leave that little pink edge on the top left. Do the same over here, and I'm really letting my sort of scribbling on top here get nice and random, because I want them to be nice and expressive and loose. So once you've done that, we then want to go ahead and go to our colours. We'll go to the blue just beside it, so the fourth colour on the top row, and repeat again. So we add in the blue in the top, sort of the bottom right, should I say, of each one, leaving that top left edge for the brighter colours. And you can see I'm being a bit more sort of daring to get quite close to those edges, because this area here that we're doing is slightly closer to us. So we're seeing the shadowed side of the tree. Of course, the lighter side is on the other side of the tree where that moonlight is hitting. So this side's going to be a little bit darker. So we've got this area of blue. We're then going to go to our colors and grab the color underneath that blue. So the second color in the fourth column, and repeat, but this time of course adding in more shadow tones, darkening that up. And this will be quite firm on this side. We're going to add in a good amount of this kind of navy color on top of here, dashing in there and just letting it get nice and random and sporadic, and let your brush strokes be a bit crazy so that they kind of just drop in random areas that you weren't really anticipating. So now you've done that, we've now got everything we need to start erasing from these layers. So let's do exactly that. We're going to go to the layer, we're going to tap on it, and we're going to add a mask. Then we're going to go to the mask itself, making sure you're on this part and your color is set to black. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go up in this artistic section to Aurora. And we're going to start off with the brush size around about sort of the 7% mark. This is going to be nice and large, so just be careful. And you're just going to chop away into it. We're creating the gaps in the leaves. So we're just cutting away, cutting away, cutting away. And because we've added a mask, if you get rid of something you really like the look of, or you've maybe really adjusted the shape of your tree too much, paint it back in with white. So we're just dashing away, dash, dash, dash. We're not going to go too crazy too early because we've got the other layer that we also need to chop into. So nice little dashes in here. Reduce the brush size to maybe like 4%, and just on the edges, just try and just take away a little bit here and there. Just really break up those leaves, give them a really nice sort of more random scatty look to them. Just dashing away towards these edges, being brave, getting rid of them. Little something like this. Because then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and go to our layers. We'll turn off this layer for a second. We'll then go down to this layer here, which is the background of our leaves. We turned it down in opacity. We'll turn it back up. We'll tap on it. We will give it a mask as well. And then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll start to erase on there. So again, making sure you're on the mask. We will turn on the layer in front because now things are going to start to come to life and you want to try and work out what you do and do not want to cut away. So remembering that you're on the background layer here. So if you start to see that something's not erasing, it's because potentially there's nothing in that space. It's potentially on the layer above. So again, going in with your brush Aurora, maybe 6% on this one, and we'll just start hacking away into our background shape. And you've kind of then got two layers of tree, which is then just going to give you lots of depth in your sort of foliage of the tree. So I'm just going to continue to hack away into here, dashing away, breaking up the background layer of color, creating that nice flaky, almost very scattered look to the leaves. And then again, I'll reduce my brush size down to maybe 3% and start chopping away again. So dash, dash, dash. Get rid of them from the edges, will look great. It will give you that nice loose look to the painting. And again, it is all meant to be like that anyway, this nice loose feel. And once you're sort of looking at your design and you start to work out some of the shapes from it, go back to your top layer and the mask for that, and then start hacking away at that again until you just start to see certain areas that you want to sort of get rid of, sort of become less. And they're going to be a lot more skinny in terms of the depth. So we're just going to continue to jump between the two layers until we end up with something quite see-through and a little bit transparent. So what I'll do is on the screen, I will show you what my final result looks like. So you've got something to aim for with your own work. So you'll see that over on the left in a second. So dash away into here, and we're slowly revealing the branches. And that's why we drew them in, so that any sort of gaps in our leaves here are going to be exposed. Then what we'll go ahead and do is go back to the base layer again, the mask for it, and we'll just get rid of anything we don't like. Like I wanted to get rid of some of these ones down here. Anything that's running a bit too stray. And also I really want to break up the edges a lot. I really want the edges to be nice and thin. So I'm going back over them, really trying to get rid of them. But you should end up with something a little bit like this, where you can see some of the colours coming through. Now what we are going to go ahead and do though is we're going to add in some extra colour because of the moonlight. So we're going to go to our layers and making sure we're on the top layer here, making sure you're on the layer and not the mask. So that's important. You want to be here, not up here. So here, go to your colours, we're going to want to go ahead and grab this color here in the top left of the palette. In fact, let's jump straight to this one. Let's go straight to this one here. It's the middle color in the first column. We're going to go back to our brush and making sure we go back to the Terra layer, but we drop the size down to the 3% mark. What we're then going to go ahead and do is go to the layer, we're going to tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it because I like the shape. I don't want to ruin the shape at this point. So if we alpha lock the layer, what we can now do is start to sort of dash in areas of nice light color where we can see sort of the shape of our tree and the areas that are facing our moonlight. So these areas here are basically leaves right on the top that are facing our light source that we can get in and add in some extra little areas of color to. Now, in this area here of the body of the tree, you want to be very sparing with this. You don't really want to add in too much at all. Just the odd little speck towards the top edges will look fantastic. Just catch on some of those circular clusters that we added in, and you'll see that they start to really reflect that lighting coming from the moon. And if you want to, you can maybe add in the tiniest sort of underlit areas where some of the leaves just towards the bottom are just sort of rounding off that lighting as such. So just a few specks here, they're just sort of reflecting that light towards us. Then we can go to our layer and go down to the background area as well. We can tap on that, alpha lock that of our leaves, and then maybe add in a couple on there too. So just chucking some a little bit further back. You may see them break through, you may not, but just a few, especially up towards this top left edge, will look great. Give you that nice petal look to it. Odd little speck in there, and I'm happy. So I'm going to leave my tree as it is at this stage. What we're then going to do though is go above the tree and our leaves here and create a new layer. We're going to go to our brushes. We're going to go ahead and use the snow gum brush under organic. So go to organic and the snow gum. The brush color is still going to be the middle color in the first column. And the size for a minute is set to, let's drop that down, about 5 or 6%. And we're just going to sort of dash in a few of these extra more defined leaves. So not thin, sort of highly pressured like that. Just a few areas of really defined leaves towards the edges. Something a little bit like this. And just tapping away, adding them in. You don't want to add in too many all the way around. Just a few here and there that are just catching some light, and it will just add in those more defined petals. So just the odd little bit that's sort of right off the top edge of the tree. It's hard to explain sometimes, trust me. But we'll add in these little specks around the outside here, just a few of them like so. That will just add to that look. And while we're doing this, we'll go ahead and add in some of the snow gum that's going to fall down. So we'll go ahead and just sort of tap away, adding in a few little random petals here and there. So a couple of taps with the smaller size. Maybe increase the size to 10% and tap in again. And just adding in a few leaves here and there. So a good tap will give you a single sort of petal. And these are just going to be falling down on towards the ground. So we want to tap to the point where we only get a few. We don't want to add in a large cluster too much, but just enough that are just falling off and flaking off from the top of our tree. So I'm just messing around with the placement of them. A few that run across the tree will look great, but just sort of falling in the wind, and just let them run off towards the right hand side here. And the snow gum will look great because it will make them all look really scattered and running in different directions based off of potentially the wind. So we'll end up with some nice falling petals like this. The next step, of course, is to paint in our tree. Now for a minute, we're going to go ahead and just turn off all of the layers of leaves. So we'll turn off this layer of leaves, we'll turn off the background layer of leaves. We'll also turn off the petals that we just added. We'll go back to the layer for the actual tree. We'll create a new layer above it and tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab this color here at the bottom of the fifth column. We'll go to our brush library. We'll go to painting, and we're going to use the Nico roll again. And we're going to add in some areas of highlight that are coming from the moon. Now, what I don't want to do, and I did this in my stream practice, I don't want to add any color down here. I kind of want to just focus the user's attention here. So we're just not going to bother down there, basically. So about 5%. We'll start to introduce some areas of highlight, maybe a rock here. Just a little bit of color. And then we'll work from there. So that's like a small area of a boulder that's just getting a little bit of light from above. We can then maybe just sort of introduce another one right next to it, and just using the Nico roll, be nice and random and block in some color if you feel is necessary. I might even reduce the brush size down to about 3 or 4%. I'm going to add in another boulder here let that run over towards the right, so like a little ledge. And then you want to be kind of brave and chuck one in, say here. So I'm just going to create like a diagonal line and then just a fall off, and then maybe just add in a chunk of color towards the top edge. We'll come back to this later on anyway and start to erase into it a little bit more, but we're trying to just create that little area of landscape just here. On the right, I've got a nice big boulder here, so I can just nicely run in some color here. So if you need to, you may need to adjust your original shape for this area, but a boulder that's facing the light source. And then I'm going to leave this space now so that I can just focus on the tree. So I want to go ahead and of course go down the tree. I want to just be nice and light with my pressure, let that run round. And then I'm going to kind of just let this one sort of run down here. So it's like the sort of tree is twisting. I can't talk very well today, so I apologize. But the tree is sort of twisting. And then this root here is sort of making its way over here, down towards this ledge here, where maybe we just reduce the brush size to about 2%. And we introduce another line of sort of just area of root and sort of the curves and twists in the tree, and then maybe just color that in a little bit more. So you can kind of already see there the twists and the curving of it into the trunk. Now we can do the right side as well. So we can go over this edge here because the light's sort of coming across. It will just get a little bit on here, but we can wrap some light around the tree as well. So we can maybe sort of bring that over here. And you can see I'm not following the edge there because I want to, again, show more of a twist, more curves and just random angles that the tree is moving in and it has grown in. And then I'm just going to add some really nice light streaks towards the inner area of the trunk. So just where the light is just wrapping round a little bit, maybe catching on a slightly more shadowed area. Then we'll go ahead and move up. We'll go ahead and identify which area sits in front of which. You've got two branches here, so I could go this way, and that would kind of identify that the main area of the trunk continues up and then this one breaks off but way further back. But a simple change of just adding in some highlight here and then letting that just run to here kind of shows that this is the more dominant, it's closer to us, and therefore your tree actually is a little bit closer here, and then this one is just drifting off into the distance. So just a simple change in your lighting can make such a difference to how things are viewed. We'll go up and down some of the left edges of the branches. You see I'm being nice and quick and easy now. I just want to catch on some of these areas. Just a little bit of this colour. We've got a further highlight to add, so this won't be the only highlight that they see. And then I'm going to go ahead and just go up this edge, keeping it nice and loose. So we're just chucking it on now. Just chucking it on. Potentially we just run that over here too. Some nice light areas here and there that just getting a little bit of lighting. So you're kind of outlining the tree, but giving it that nice contorted look to it. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create another new layer. And we're going to tap on this layer and we're going to clip and mask it too. Now I create separate layers quite frequently because I like to sort of adjust each individual one individually. So we've got a separate layer now for the further highlights. So we're going to go ahead and grab this color here in the top right of the palette. I'm going to make the brush size a bit smaller, about 2%, and now we're going to try and define some of these edges a bit more. So I'm going to be nice and quick and easy just on the top of some of these rocks, just some areas of extra little lighting here and there that are just coming from above. Likewise over here, we can just maybe block in a little bit of lighting here, go around the top edge of some of these rocks, across here, and even if you get the odd little flake like that, leave it, it will look great. We'll go up and down the root edge here. You can see I'm kind of just working outside the shape of the tree to start with, bringing it inwards, and whatever catches, catches. I'm going to just try and be a bit smaller with the 2% now. I'm going to add in a little bit purposely now on this area of the root and let that just run into a dark area. Then I'm going to go around this edge here on the inside of the tree, push that down here, creating a nice bold edge. The odd little really bright highlight will look really bold and sort of very daring. And we'll go around this edge, a little bit onto the top edge of here. So again, where the lighting's just maybe coming across, we'll add in a nice sort of area of colour on top of here. See, just little scribbles of colour. That's all I'm adding. Just like, that's all we needed. We'll go across here on the back edge. We'll definitely add some in here. And then you don't want to spend too much time on this because again, once we bring in our leaves again, all of this will disappear. It's just where you can see through, you'll see these really beautiful highlights. We'll add in a little bit towards the edge under here, just a tiny little bit. And we'll go ahead and adjust some of these ones up here, just where they're nice and bright, really getting a lot of that light from the moon. And if they're seen through our leaves, they're seen through our leaves. That'll look great. A little something up there too, up here, and across there too. Now that's all we really need to add here. The only thing I want to do is adjust some of these orange areas. So if we go back down to the orange area, if we tap on it and we go ahead and mask it, and then using the mask and color set to black, we're going to go to our brush library. And under painting, we're going to use the Stucco brush. I love this brush, it's got so much texture in it. And all we're going to do is basically just quickly run it over the top of some of these areas down here and erase from them. It will leave lots of residue, but it will also add in a nice amount of texture. So I'm really just running over the top of them in the boulder areas down here, like as in a boulder in terms of a rocky boulder. So you end up with a little bit more like this, where you've taken away a lot of the color, but you'll have left like this little bit of texture. You see that on the sort of area there. Now we've done that, what we can then go ahead and do is bring in our leaves again and turn them back on. So the leaves in front of the tree, the leaves behind the tree, and our nice little petals from above. And you should end up with something like this. And if you go ahead and pinch with 2 fingers and go full screen with 4, you end up with today's finished design. Now the only thing I would do, and I have done, is just move my moon and the glow layers for it just up towards the top left, giving a little bit more separation. So there you go, that's the end of today's tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please be sure to drop a like down below. And if you liked this one, you'll also like the other version I did of this on YouTube as well, as I mentioned in the video. I'll leave a link to that again in the description down below. And as always, a massive thank you to everyone over on Patreon who supports me, who help make these videos possible. If you want to get your name featured in videos, get access to my 60+ tutorials that are exclusive to Patreon supporters, have sneak peeks of upcoming designs, early access to tutorials, and much, much more, hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And if you're interested in any of today's equipment, today's glove is the Doodro glove, and of course the pen mat screen cover and the Sketchboard Pro, which there are discount codes for in the description as well. So make sure to use the links in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.